condemnation from the United States, saying it condemns in the strongest terms what it's labelled the South African government's recent detention of American officials.
And this, of course, is in relation to an operation conducted by Home Affairs and law enforcement officials in Johannesburg, in which 7 Kenyans were arrested for violating the country's immigration laws.
Well, the United States statement claims that American officials performing their duties to provide humanitarian support to Afrikaners, who, by the way, have been given this refugee dispensation by the Trump administration, were detained and claimed that their official passport information was publicly released.
Now, Home Affairs Minister Dr. Leon Schreiber on Thursday put out a lengthy statement explaining that the Kenyan officials working illegally by processing Afrikaner refugee applications on behalf of the United States and were in fact arrested and issued deportation orders, and that no U.S. officials were in fact arrested.
Well, let's go now to the United States. Bring in SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease, watching all angles on this story, Sherwin, and a flurry of communication contradicting messages and facts on the table ultimately here. What do we know?
Well, it is becoming a he said, she said scenario here, Tembekile, in terms of what you saw articulated by the State Department spokesperson earlier today, and then the repudiation in part by Crispin Peary from the Department of International Relations, right? The accusation here by the State Department is that doxing and harassment of American officials by the South African government occurred, condemning in the strongest terms the South African government's reaction, recent detention, I beg your pardon, of U.S. officials. Of course, this is being disputed by the Home Affairs statement by Dr. Leon Schreiber, in which he asserts that no U.S. officials were arrested in the process. The operation was not conducted at a diplomatic site, and no members of the public or prospective refugees were harassed. Crispin Peary subsequently in their statement saying that separately we've noted an unsubstantiated allegation regarding the private information of U.S. officials. South Africa treats all matters of data security with the utmost seriousness and operates under stringent legal and diplomatic protocols. We categorically reject any suggestion of state involvement in such actions, then asserting further that they remained committed to principle and transparent diplomacy. Of course, after Leon Schreiber's statement yesterday, the Department of International Relations had confirmed that they were going to be engaging diplomatically with both the Kenyan government and the United States. But as expected, this is just the latest layer in this complicated diplomatic spat between Pretoria and Washington, D.C. Of course, the genesis of this, the executive order in February by President Trump as it relates to Afrikaners and the subsequent refugee a program that has been initiated for them. Also, remember the broad context here, Tembekile. The United States is only allowing so-called South African refugees, some 7,500 at that cap, into the United States, and barring all other refugees from other war zones, Afghanistan, Sudan, you go through the long list from entering the United States. So favoring the Afrikaners here, but I think broadly the exchange you're seeing publicly now between Pretoria and Washington, speaking to a fraught relationship that, you can point to the relationship that emanates from the recent G20 summit in Johannesburg. Of course, the United States recently hosting its first Sherpa meeting under its presidency in Washington, D.C. On Tuesday and Monday this week. And of course, South Africa excluded from that meeting despite being a founding member of the G20 bloc.
And you speak of fraught relations, Sherwin. In the U.S. statement, one of the things it says, in fact, is a warning about severe consequences if the South African government fails to hold responsible those it claims are responsible for this harassment of Americans and the detention, which we know Pretoria has already denied. Is that a threat?
It certainly sounds like a threat, and you've heard this sort of threatening posture. This is not the first time you've heard it from a U.S. official. I will remind you that very recently during the G20 summit, the spokesperson of the White House President, Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, talking about South Africa's president's comments regarding U.S. participation in the ongoing G20 summit at that time as South Africa's president running his mouth. So the tone and tenor from the United States is very clear. I'll recall that there are various efforts within the United States Congress, be that in the House of Representatives or the United States Senate, seeking to review the bilateral relationship between South Africa and the United States. There's been some talk, certainly in a recent Senate hearing, where the U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer asked a question by John Kennedy, a Republican senator from the South, in which he talked about the possibility of South Africa's exclusion from AGOA. In addition to that, John Kennedy is also the author of a bilateral review legislation in the Senate, which echoes a similar legislation in the United States House of Representatives. Of course, there are many questions as to whether legislation of that nature would reach the 60 vote threshold in the Senate for passage. That remains an open question, but it is no secret that there are certain elements within the United States Congress seeking to review that relationship and have threatened punitive measures against ANC officials, members of the South African government. They're talking about the Global Magnitsky Act, which allows the United States to impose sanctions on countries or individuals around the world. And so that, I imagine, is part of the consequences the State Department spokesperson is referring to here.
And lastly, some reports out of the United States tonight showing that the Senate has basically given its endorsement for Leo Bazal to become the United States' new ambassador to South Africa. If it happens, it'll be in January next year. Has that been confirmed?
I am not able to confirm that as SABC News at this moment. We understand that the process has been ongoing. There is a block of nominees at a sub-cabinet level and at ambassadorial level, a tranche of nominees that the Senate Republican leader has moved as a block. We understand that process has been moving steadily through committee, so we are expecting some sort of confirmation that, those confirmations have happened along party lines around the Republicans have a 4+ majority in the Senate or around there. So we expect it to happen. I just cannot confirm it. We have not seen official confirmation from the Senate, despite some reports in South Africa to this effect. We cannot at this point confirm that the Bozal confirmation has happened, but we certainly expect it to happen in the hours or maybe days ahead.
All right, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, a man in the United States, reporting on 2 developments that we're watching out of there and in South Africa tonight.